The hospital called me a hero on Monday, and on Tuesday my own family made me the biggest fool in Cleveland. It was my wife, Sarah, and my best friend Ben, who stood by and watched it happen. They put my picture in the local paper, you see, a dad giving his kidney to his sick 9-year-old son, Leo. And me? My name is Mark, and I was the fool smiling on the front page. I was just hours away from the surgery, feeling like I could finally save my boy. Leo had been sick for so long, and this was our miracle. Sarah, my wife, was holding my hand, telling me how brave I was. My whole world felt right, you know, like I was finally doing the one thing a father is supposed to do. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't know from inside the hospital. A woman's voice, tight and nervous, said, "Mr. Collins? This is Patricia Neal from administration. We need to talk. There's a problem with your final test." My heart dropped. I thought maybe my own health was bad. I never imagined the problem wasn't with my body, but with my whole life. "A problem?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm fine. All the doctors said I'm a perfect match for Leo." I looked over at my wife, Sarah, who was watching me with worried eyes. The administrator, Patricia, took a shaky breath on the other end of the line. "Sir, I know this is difficult to hear, especially right now, but a flag came up on your final compatibility panel." I could hear papers rustling. My mind was racing. Was the surgery going to be cancelled? Was my son Leo going to get worse? I felt a cold sweat on my forehead. "Just tell me what it is," I said, my voice getting louder. "We can fix it. Whatever it is, we'll fix it." Her silence was the scariest part. It felt like she was trying to find the right words to destroy a man's world. "Mr. Collins," she finally said, her voice soft with pity, "this isn't a medical issue we can fix. This result is... it's a personal matter. It's about the information you gave us." I had no idea what she was talking about. What information? "What information?" I demanded, my patience gone. I signed a mountain of paperwork. What did I miss? I remembered sitting in a small office, signing form after form, my mind only on my son, Leo, lying in his hospital bed. I would have signed anything to save him. The administrator, Patricia, cleared her throat. "As part of our final protocol, we run a genetic marker confirmation. It's just a formality usually. We do it for every living donor and recipient." My blood ran cold. I'm a simple guy, I work with my hands. I don't know much about fancy science, but I knew what genetic meant. It meant blood. It meant family. "A genetic test," I whispered, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. I looked at my wife, Sarah, and for the first time I saw a flicker of pure terror in her eyes. It was a look I'd never seen before, and it made my stomach turn. "Mr. Collins," the administrator said gently, "this test looks at biology. It tells us who is related by blood, and your test, and it told us something impossible." My throat went dry. I leaned against the cold wall of the hospital hallway, my legs feeling like jelly. "What do you mean, impossible?" I whispered into the phone. The hospital administrator, Patricia Neal, hesitated for a second, and I knew she was about to ruin my life. I held my breath, waiting for the axe to fall. The whole world seemed to go silent. All I could hear was the beating of my own heart, fast and loud like a drum. Then she said the 3 words that cracked my world in half. She said them so softly, but they hit me like a truck. "You're not his father." The phone slipped out of my hand and clattered onto the shiny floor. Not his father. It didn't make any sense. I was the one who was there when my son Leo was born. I was the one who cut the cord. I was his dad. It was the only thing I was sure of in my entire life. I stared at the wall, but I didn't see it. I saw nothing. The universe had just been wiped clean, and I was floating in the dark, all alone. The cheerful hospital hallway started to feel like a nightmare. A poster with a smiling cartoon bear said, "Get well soon," and I wanted to rip it off the wall. My son, Leo, was in a room just down the hall waiting for me, his dad to save him. But I wasn't his dad. The administrator's words echoed in my head. "You're not his father." Every memory I had with Leo flashed before my eyes, but now they were all a lie. Teaching him to ride his bike in the park, him falling and scraping his knee, me carrying him home. Was that a lie? Holding his little hand while doctors put needles in his arm, telling him to be brave like me. Was that a lie too? My whole life, my whole identity, was built on being this boy's father. If I wasn't his dad, then who was I? I slowly turned my head and looked at my wife, Sarah. She was standing a few feet away, her hand over her mouth. The look of love and pride she'd had just minutes ago was gone. Now she just looked terrified. I picked my phone up off the floor and walked toward my wife, Sarah. Each step felt heavy, like I was wading through wet cement. Her smile was gone, replaced by a mask of fear. She knew. Before I even said a word, I could see it in her eyes. She knew this day could come. "Mark? Honey, what is it?" "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, reaching for my arm. I pulled away from her touch like it was fire. Her acting after all this time made me sick to my stomach. "They ran a final test, Sarah," I said. My voice didn't sound like my own. It was low and cold. "A DNA test." I watched her face, searching for any sign that this was all a big mistake. For a second she looked confused. But then I saw it. A flicker of panic deep in her eyes. It was the look of someone who had been caught, whose darkest secret had just been dragged into the light, and in that moment I knew the test was right. My life, as I knew it, was over. I stared at my wife, Sarah, waiting for an answer. Her eyes darted around the hospital hallway, looking for any escape. "A DNA test?" she stammered, forcing a small, nervous laugh. "Mark, that's ridiculous. The hospital must have made a mistake. You know they mix up files all the time." She tried to sound convincing, but her voice was thin and shaky. I just stood there, silent, letting her words hang in the air like smoke. I didn't get angry. I didn't yell. I just watched her. I saw the way her hand trembled as she tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. I saw how she couldn't look me in the eye for more than a second. I had known this woman for 15 years. I knew every tell, every little habit. And right then, her whole body was screaming that she was lying. "Look at me, Sarah," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Look me in the eye and tell me my son, Leo, is my son." She finally lifted her gaze to mine, and that's when the first tear escaped and rolled down her cheek. The dam was starting to break. That one tear sent my mind spinning back in time. I suddenly saw myself and Sarah, 10 years younger, standing in front of a judge at the old courthouse in downtown Cleveland. We were so broke, we couldn't afford a big wedding, but we were so happy. I remembered looking into her eyes and feeling like the luckiest man on earth. I had whispered my promise to her, a promise I meant with every piece of my soul. "It's you and me against the world, Sarah," I'd said. Always. I truly believed it. I built my entire life on that simple idea. Every long hour I worked, every sacrifice I made was for her, for the family we were going to build together, a family built on trust and love. Then, my mind snapped back to the present. I was in a cold hospital hallway, and the woman I made that promise to was crying, not because she was scared for our son, Leo, but because our whole life together, that promise, had been a complete and total lie. I grabbed her arm, not hard, but firmly, and led her into an empty family waiting room. The chairs were plastic and uncomfortable. It was the perfect place for our world to end. "Tell me," I said, my voice hollow, and she did. The story came out between sobs and gasps for air. "It was from a long time ago," she said, "right after we got married. I had a new job that kept me on the road trying to build a better life for us." She was lonely. She felt distant from me. One night, she made a mistake. A terrible mistake. She swore it was just one night. A moment of weakness with an old friend from college who was in town. A man who she said understood her loneliness. She cried about how she found out she was pregnant a few weeks later and was too scared to tell me the truth. She prayed that the baby, our Leo, looked like me. "I was going to tell you so many times, Mark," she sobbed, "but I was a coward. I was so scared of losing you." But in her whole tearful story, there was one thing she left out. She never said his name. Hearing my wife Sarah's confession felt like getting punched in the stomach. The air left my lungs. For a second I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. All I could feel was the white-hot pain of being betrayed by the one person I trusted most. My best friend, too. My mind reeled, but then a single clear thought cut through all the noise and the pain. Leo. My son Leo was lying in a hospital bed just down the hall. He was sick, he was waiting for a kidney, he was waiting for me, and right now he wasn't getting one. Suddenly the anger didn't matter, the hurt didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was saving that little boy. I grabbed Sarah's shoulders and looked her straight in the eyes. Her tears meant nothing to me in that moment. "Forget me," I said, my voice shaking with a new kind of energy. "This isn't about us right now. We have to save our son." My whole world had narrowed to one single desperate mission. "Who is he, Sarah? Who is his father? We are running out of time." I pulled Sarah out of that quiet little room and marched her straight back to the administrator's office. Patricia Neal looked up, surprised to see us again. I didn't care. I laid it all out for her, my voice begging. "You have to help us," I pleaded. "My son, Leo, needs a kidney. His biological father is out there somewhere, and we have no idea who he is. You have to find him." I felt Sarah trembling beside me. Patricia's face softened with pity, but her words were like a brick wall. "Mr. Collins, I understand. I truly do. But I can't," she said gently. "Patient confidentiality is absolute. We can't just look through medical records or DNA files. It's against the law." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So what?" I shot back, my voice rising. "My son is just supposed to die because of some rule, because of a privacy policy." She looked down at her desk, unable to meet my eyes. "My hands are tied," she whispered. We had hit a dead end. Hope was slipping away, and my son was running out of time. Just when I felt like collapsing, the door to the office opened. It was Dr. Ben Carter, my best friend. Ben was more than my friend. He was like a brother to me. He was also the head transplant surgeon, the man who was supposed to perform Leo's surgery today. He was the calm in every storm, the guy I trusted with my life and my son's. He took one look at my face and at Sarah sobbing beside me, and his professional smile vanished. "Mark? What's going on?" he asked, his voice filled with real concern. "I got a page that the surgery was on hold. Is Leo okay?" I tried to speak, to explain the nightmare I had fallen into, but no words came out. My throat was tight with grief and rage. It was Sarah who finally spoke. Through her tears she looked at my best friend, the man who was supposed to save our family, and she began to confess everything. I just stood there, broken, as my wife told my best friend that she had cheated on me, and that our sick son was not my own. I watched my best friend Ben Carter as he listened to my wife Sarah's confession. His face was a mask. I couldn't tell what he was thinking. He just stood there, his hands in the pockets of his white doctor's coat, listening to the story of how my life was a lie. He didn't look at me, he didn't look at Sarah, he just stared at a spot on the floor. When she finished, the room was silent, except for Sarah's quiet crying. I expected Ben to be angry, to be disgusted, but instead, he looked up and his face was all business. He turned to the administrator, Patricia Neal. "There's another way," he said, his voice calm and sure. "A familial DNA search. We can run Leo's DNA against our own internal database. Donors, patients, employees, it's confidential. If there's a match, we'll know the father is in our system." He looked at me for the first time, a look of grim determination in his eyes. "It's a long shot, Mark," he said, "but it's Leo's only shot." A tiny spark of hope lit up in my chest. Ben was going to fix this. The administrator, Patricia, immediately shook her head. "Dr. Carter, you know we can't do that. That kind of search is a huge violation of privacy. It's an ethical nightmare." But Ben didn't back down. He was the hospital's golden boy, their star surgeon, and he knew it. He took a step closer to her desk. "This isn't about privacy anymore, Patricia," he argued, his voice low but firm. "This is a medical emergency. A 9-year-old boy's life is on the line. We can keep it quiet. No one has to know. We find the man, we see if he's a match, and we save the boy. It's that simple. I just stood there watching my best friend fight for my son. He was bending the rules, risking his position. All for me. I had never felt so grateful for him in my entire life. He was my brother, my rock. Finally, after a long, tense silence, Patricia sighed. "Okay, doctor," she said, looking defeated. "For the boy. I'll authorize the search." Ben had done it. He had moved a mountain for us. The next few hours were the worst of my life. I went back to Leo's room and sat in the uncomfortable chair next to his bed. My wife, Sarah, stayed in the waiting room. I couldn't even look at her right now. I just watched my son sleep. His breathing was shallow, and he looked so small and fragile. I found myself studying his face, something I'd done a million times, but this time it was different. Did he have my nose? I always thought he did. Were those my eyes? I traced the line of his chin with my finger, searching for a piece of myself in him. Every memory we shared now felt like a question. That time he laughed so hard, milk came out of his nose. Was that my laugh? I felt a wave of gratitude for Ben again. He was the one fighting for Leo, for our family. He was a true friend. I didn't know how I'd ever repay him. Just as the sun started to go down, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I looked at the screen. It was the hospital's main number. My heart stopped. The wait was over. While I was sitting there waiting for that phone call, my wife Sarah was hiding in the hospital chapel. I can only imagine what was going through her head. She was probably replaying that one night, 10 years ago, over and over again. The night this whole nightmare began. She told me I was on a business trip, a 2-week job out in Arizona. She was at home in our little house in Cleveland, all alone. She was lonely. Then she got a call from an old friend from college, a man I didn't know very well. He was in town for a medical conference, he said. He took her to dinner. He told her she was beautiful. He told her she married the wrong man, and for one night she was weak. For one single night, she believed him. She spent the next 10 years burying that secret, building a life on top of it, praying it would stay dead and gone. But now, as she sat in that chapel, she had to know. The past wasn't dead. It was here to take everything from us, starting with our son Leo. My hand was shaking as I swiped to answer the phone. It was the hospital administrator, Patricia Neal. "Mr. Collins," she said. Her voice sounded strained. "Yes, I'm here," I said, my own voice barely a whisper. Did you find him?" The silence on the other end of the line was the longest second of my life. Then she said the words I was praying for. "Yes, Mr. Collins, we have a match." I almost collapsed from relief. Tears streamed down my face. A match. It was a miracle. It meant Leo had a chance. He was going to be okay. All the anger and the pain disappeared for a moment, replaced by pure, overwhelming joy. "Thank you," I choked out. "Oh God, thank you. Who is it? Where is he? I'll get in my car right now and go find him." But Patricia didn't answer right away. There was another one of those terrible pauses. And when she finally spoke, the joy in my heart turned back into a cold, hard knot of fear. "That," she said slowly, "is the complicated part." "Complicated? What do you mean, complicated?" I asked, my voice rising with panic. My mind jumped to the worst possible conclusions. Was the man in jail? Did he live in another country? Did he say no? "Just tell me," I pleaded. "I can handle it." I could hear Patricia take a deep breath, like she was preparing herself. "Mr. Collins, the man isn't far away. You won't have to drive anywhere." That confused me. What did she mean? Was he a neighbor? Someone who lived on our street? How could he be so close? "I don't understand," I said. "Where is he?" The line was quiet for a moment, and I had the crazy thought that I could hear the sounds of the hospital, of machines beeping and people talking, through her phone. That's when she delivered the next blow, a blow that made no sense at all. "The match," she said, her voice so quiet I could barely hear her. "He's in our system because he works here. He's on staff at this hospital. He works here. In this hospital. My mind was spinning. A big hospital in a city like Cleveland has thousands of employees. Doctors, nurses, janitors, cooks, security guards. It could be anyone. How were we supposed to find him? Who? I asked Patricia, the administrator. You have to tell me who it is. I could feel my own heart pounding in my ears. I was about to find out the name of the man who was connected to my son, Leo, by blood. The man who could save his life. The man who slept with my wife, Sarah. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. I could tell she didn't want to be the one to tell me. She knew this wasn't just a name. It was a bomb she was about to drop on my life. "Mr. Collins, are you sitting down?" she asked, her voice full of pity. "Just give me the name," I said, my patience completely gone. "I need the name." She took one final heavy breath. I braced myself, ready for anything. Or so I thought. I leaned my head back against the cold hospital wall, closing my eyes. I was ready for a stranger's name. I was ready for a fight, for an awkward conversation, for begging a man I'd never met to save my son. I was ready for anything except what came next. The administrator, Patricia, finally spoke. Her voice was just a whisper, as if she knew the words themselves could break me. "The match," she said, pausing for a heartbeat. "The one and only match in our entire database for your son's biological father." She hesitated one last time, and then she said his name. "Is Dr. Benjamin Carter." The name didn't register at first. It was just a sound. But then it clicked into place. Ben. My best friend. The man who stood next to me at my wedding. The man who was supposed to be operating on my son this morning. The man who had just promised to help me find the father. The world didn't just tilt. It stopped completely. And in the deafening silence of my own mind, I could only think of one thing. It couldn't be him. "No," I said instantly. A strange, sharp laugh escaped my lips. It sounded like it came from someone else. "No, you've made a mistake," I told Patricia, my voice shaking. "That's impossible. You need to run the test again. You mixed up the samples." It had to be a lab error. It was the only explanation that made any sense. It couldn't be Ben. Ben was my brother. He held Leo the day he was born. He coached his little league team with me. He was the one who pushed the hospital to do this crazy search in the first place, all to help me. The idea was insane. It was a joke, a cruel, twisted joke. "I'm sorry, Mr. Collins," Patricia started to say, but I cut her off. "No, you're wrong." I hung up the phone without another word. My mind was made up. It was a mistake, a terrible, unbelievable mistake. And I knew who I had to talk to next. I had to find my wife, Sarah. She would tell me how crazy this was. She would prove that the hospital had gotten it all wrong. I walked through the hospital in a daze. My mind kept repeating, "It's a mistake, it's a mistake." I found my wife, Sarah, in the hospital cafeteria. She was sitting at a small table, staring into a cup of coffee that had gone cold. She looked so small and broken, and for a second I almost felt sorry for her. I walked over and stood in front of her. My anger was gone, replaced by a strange, numb calm. I truly believed this was all a crazy mix-up, and she was the only one who could help me fix it. "Sarah," I said, my voice quiet. "The hospital called. They found him. They found Leo's father." Her head snapped up, and for the first time in hours, a tiny glimmer of hope appeared in her red, swollen eyes. "Really?" she whispered. "Who is it? Can we find him? Will he help?" She thought this was good news. She thought our problem was solved. She had no idea about the name I was holding, the name that was about to destroy what little was left of our world. I looked down at my wife, Sarah, and her hopeful, desperate face. She was waiting for the name of a stranger, a ghost from her past, a man we could find, get what we needed from, and then forget. I let the silence stretch out, watching the hope in her eyes flicker. Then I said the name. I didn't yell it. I didn't whisper it. I said it flat, with no emotion at all. "It's Ben." Her reaction was instant. It was like a movie scene. The little bit of color she had in her cheeks vanished. Her eyes went wide with a kind of horror I had never seen before. Her hand, which was holding her coffee cup, went limp. The cup dropped, hitting the hard floor and shattering into 100 tiny pieces. A small choked gasp escaped her lips, and in that moment, all my denial, all my desperate hope that this was a mistake, evaporated. The mistake wasn't in the lab. The mistake was my entire life. Her shattered face, surrounded by the shattered cup, told me the impossible truth. It was him. It had always been him. We just sat there, surrounded by the smell of spilled coffee. People were staring, but I didn't care. The rest of the story finally came out, no longer in vague terms, but with a name attached to the betrayal. It wasn't just some random old friend, she confessed. It was Ben. He had been in Cleveland for a medical conference all those years ago. He was the one who called her. He took her to a fancy dinner downtown, a place I could never afford. He told her that he had been in love with her back in college, before she ever even met me. He told her that he thought about her all the time. He told her that she had married the wrong man, that I couldn't understand her the way he could. It was just one night, she sobbed, repeating the same pathetic excuse. I was lonely and he said all the right things, but it wasn't just one night anymore. It was a planned attack. My best friend, my brother Ben, hadn't just made a mistake. He had poisoned my marriage on purpose. He had actively tried to steal my wife. I felt completely empty. The anger was so big, so total, that it wasn't even hot anymore. It was a cold, dark hole inside me. The two most important people in my life, my wife, Sarah, and my best friend, Ben, had built a cage of lies around me, and I had been living in it for 10 years without ever knowing. I looked at Sarah still crying on the floor of the cafeteria, but I didn't feel pity. I felt nothing. I got up from the table without a word and walked away. I left her there with her coffee-soaked apologies and her shattered life. I didn't know if I was ever going to speak to her again. Right then, I didn't care. All I knew was that there was one more conversation I had to have, one more person I had to face. I walked through the bright, clean hallways of the hospital, my footsteps echoing. I wasn't just walking, I was hunting. I was on my way to find my best friend. I was on my way to find Ben. I found Ben in his fancy office. It had a big wooden desk and shelves full of thick medical books, awards and diplomas hung on the walls. It was the office of a man who saves lives, a hero. He was sitting behind his desk, looking over the chart for my son, Leo. He had a concerned look on his face, like he was trying to solve a difficult puzzle. The hypocrisy of it all made me want to throw up. He looked up when I came in, and his face broke into that warm, familiar smile, the one I had trusted for 15 years. "Mark," he said, his voice full of fake cheer. "Any news yet from the lab?" He was asking about the search for himself. I didn't say anything. I just pushed the heavy office door shut behind me. It clicked, and the sound seemed to echo in the sudden, tense silence. There was nowhere for him to run. The act was over, and he was finally going to face me. I walked slowly toward his desk. Ben's smile started to fade, replaced by a look of confusion. He could feel that something was terribly wrong. "Mark, what is it? You're scaring me, buddy." I stopped right in front of him, close enough to see the tiny lines around his eyes. Eyes that had been lying to me for a decade. "They found a match," I said, my voice flat and cold. His face lit up with a brilliant fake smile. "That's fantastic news. Who is it? We need to contact him right away." He was still playing the part of the loyal friend. He was going to make me say it. I just stared at him, letting the silence hang in the air between us. I watched the confusion return to his face. He didn't understand why I wasn't happy. Finally, I leaned forward, putting my hands on his big, expensive desk, and I let the one word that mattered drop into the space between us like a stone. "You." The smile on his face didn't just fade. It froze. The color drained from his skin. The friendly doctor, the loyal best friend, the hero, it all vanished in an instant. All that was left was a guilty man, trapped in his own lie. Ben just stared at me from across his big desk. The silence was so heavy I could feel it pressing on my chest. For a second, I saw a flash of denial in his eyes, like he was going to try and lie his way out of it. But he looked at my face, at the cold certainty in my eyes, and he knew it was over. He slumped back in his expensive leather chair, a broken man. His confession wasn't like the one my wife Sarah gave me. Hers was full of tears and talk of a stupid mistake. Ben's was different. It was quiet, and somehow it was worse. "I loved her first, Mark," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I loved her in college. I was going to ask her to marry me the weekend she met you." He told me he never stopped loving her. He said our whole friendship for him was just a way to stay close to her, that one night wasn't just a mistake for him. It was the one time he got to have the life he thought he was supposed to have. My entire friendship with him had been a lie. In that moment, everything changed. I had walked into that office as a betrayed husband, looking for a fight. I walked out as something much worse, a completely powerless man. Ben, the man who had lied to me for 15 years, was now the only person on earth who could save my son, Leo. He held all the cards. The news spread through the hospital administration like a wildfire. A surgeon can't operate on his own secret son. It was a huge mess, a conflict of interest, they called it. They put the surgery on hold for good. While the men in suits had meetings and talked about rules, my son was getting sicker. Every day, I watched a little more life drain out of him, and the one man who could stop it, the one man with the perfect kidney, was the man I now hated more than anyone in the world. I was trapped. My son was trapped. And my best friend, my greatest enemy, held the key to the cage. A few days passed, and they were the worst days of my life. Leo got a fever, and the doctors started looking at me with pity in their eyes. We were running out of time. Finally, Ben agreed to meet with me and Sarah in a small, sterile conference room. He looked tired, but his eyes were hard. "I'll do it," he said with no preamble. "I'll donate my kidney." For a split second, I felt a wave of relief. But then he kept talking. "But I have conditions." I knew it wouldn't be about money. It was something worse. He looked from me to Sarah. "I'm not going to save my son's life and then just disappear," he said, his voice cold and steady. "If I do this, I'm not going to be a secret anymore. I want to be in his life. I want him to know who I am." He was using his kidney as a ransom. He was demanding a place in the very family that he had just blown apart, and my son's life was the price. I looked across the table at Ben, the man who used to be my best friend. He had me backed into a corner, and he knew it. A part of me, the angry, wounded part, wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him to go to hell and take his kidney with him. My pride was screaming at me to say no. How could I let this man into my life, into my son's life, after what he had done? How could I look at him every day and not remember the betrayal? But then I closed my eyes, and all I could see was Leo's pale, tired face. I saw him hooked up to machines, getting weaker every day. This wasn't about my pride. It wasn't about my anger or my broken heart. It was about him. I was a father before I was a husband or a friend, and a father does whatever it takes. I opened my eyes and looked at Ben. My voice was quiet, stripped of all emotion. It was the sound of complete and total surrender. "Okay," I said. "You win." The tension in the hospital was so thick you could feel it. Even though we tried to hide it, our son Leo knew something was wrong. Kids are smart like that. They can sense when the world isn't right. He was weak, but his mind was sharp. One afternoon, I was sitting by his bed trying to read him a story, but my heart wasn't in it. He put his small hand on the book, stopping me. "Dad?" he asked, his voice small and raspy. "Why is Dr. Ben here so much?" My blood ran cold. He had noticed. "And why are you and Mommy so sad all the time? You don't laugh anymore." The simple, honest question was like a punch to the gut. Our toxic adult mess was now spilling over and poisoning his world, too. I had tried so hard to protect him, but I had failed. We had to fix this, not just for the kidney, but for him. He deserved to have his happy parents back, but I had no idea how to do that. Because of Leo's question, we all knew we had to make this official. The hospital brought in a mediator, a calm woman in a suit who didn't seem to care about our drama. We sat in another cold conference room, me, my wife Sarah, and Ben. The mediator laid out the terms of our deal like it was a business negotiation. It was cold and brutal. 1. Ben would donate his kidney to my son, Leo. 2. After the surgery, when Leo was strong enough, we would all sit down and tell him the truth about who Ben is. 3. Ben would be allowed to be a regular part of Leo's life. Birthdays, holidays, soccer games. He would be there for all of it. With each point, the mediator looked at me, and with each point, I just nodded, my voice gone. I was signing a contract to let a snake into my garden forever. When it was over, the mediator closed her folder. "Okay," she said. "The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning." I didn't feel relief. I felt like I had just sold my soul. As we were getting up to leave the meeting with the mediator, one last question was burning a hole in my gut. I had to ask it. I turned to Ben, who was trying to avoid looking at me. "Why, Ben?" I asked, my voice low. "Why did you keep this a secret for 10 years? Why did you play the part of my best friend?" His answer chilled me to the bone. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't say he was scared. He looked at me with a strange kind of pity in his eyes. "Because you were happy, Mark," he said calmly. "And Leo was happy. You were a good father to him. I convinced myself that my secret was a good thing. It was protecting you both from a truth that would only cause pain." I couldn't believe the arrogance. He didn't see himself as a liar. He saw himself as some kind of silent hero making a noble sacrifice. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was just sorry that he got caught. In his mind, he was still the good guy in this story. The night before the surgery was the longest night of my life. The three of us, me, my wife Sarah, and Ben, ended up standing in the hallway outside my son Leo's room. We didn't talk. What was there to say? We were just three broken people tied together by this one little boy. I looked at Ben, the man who would save Leo's life tomorrow, and all I could feel was a cold, hard stone of hatred in my gut. I looked at Sarah, the woman I had built a life with, and I felt nothing but a hollow emptiness. We were a twisted, ugly picture, the lying wife, the snake of a best friend, and me, the fool who had trusted them both. The air was so thick with secrets and betrayal it felt hard to breathe. We just stood there in the quiet hospital hallway, a fractured family on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the morning to come and push us all over. I couldn't stand being near them anymore. I pushed open the door to Leo's room and went in alone. I needed to see him. I needed this one last moment before our world changed forever. He was sleeping, his face so peaceful. The beeping of the machines was the only sound in the room. I sat down on the edge of his bed and gently took his small hand in mine. It felt so fragile. I leaned in close and whispered to him, even though he was asleep. "Listen to me, Leo," I said, my voice cracking. "Tomorrow is a big day. You're going to get all better. But I need you to know something. No matter what happens, no matter what you learn when you get older, I am your dad. Biology doesn't make a father. Love does." It was a promise, a vow. He was my son. Always. I kissed his forehead, and a tear I didn't know I was holding back dripped onto his cheek. This was my truth, and I would never let anyone take it away from me. The next morning came too fast. The world was still dark outside when the nurses came to get Leo. A little while later, they came for Ben. I stood in the hallway with my wife Sarah, feeling like a ghost. Then I saw them. 2 gurneys, 2 hospital beds on wheels, rolling down the long, empty corridor towards us. On one, looking small and scared, was my son, Leo. On the gurney, right next to him, was Ben, my enemy, my son's secret father, the man who was about to have a piece of himself cut out to save the boy we both, in our own twisted ways, called our son. They rolled past us, the hero and the traitor, side by side on their way to the same operating room. Sarah let out a small sob, and I just stood there, frozen. The 2 big doors at the end of the hall swung open, they were wheeled inside, and then the doors swung shut, leaving us on the outside, in the silence, with nothing to do but wait. We went to the surgical waiting room. It was a miserable place, filled with uncomfortable chairs and old magazines nobody reads. I poured a cup of coffee that tasted like dirt. Sarah sat across the room from me. We didn't talk. What could we say? Every tick of the big clock on the wall felt like a hammer blow. 1 hour passed, then 2, then 4. My mind was a mess. I was praying harder than I have ever prayed in my life for my son Leo. I begged God to let him be okay, to let the surgery work. But then I thought about Ben. What was I supposed to pray for him? A dark, ugly part of me, a part I was ashamed of, wondered what I would feel if he didn't make it. Would I be sad? Relieved? The honest answer scared me. For 6 hours I sat with that ugly thought, with my fear and with the silence. Then the door to the waiting room opened, and a nurse in blue scrubs walked in, looking for us. My heart leaped into my throat. I stood up so fast my chair nearly fell over. The nurse had a calm, professional look on her face. I couldn't read it at all. I was expecting news about Leo, but she walked right up to me and spoke in a quiet voice. "I have an update on Dr. Carter," she said. My mind went blank. Ben. She was talking about Ben. "His procedure is complete," she continued. "The kidney has been successfully removed, and he's being moved to the recovery room. He's stable." I just nodded, not knowing what to feel. Relief? I guess. The man I hated was going to live. But more than that, the kidney, the whole point of this nightmare, was out. It was safe. The first half of the battle was over, but as the nurse gave me a small smile and turned to leave, the fear came crashing back down, 10 times stronger than before. The kidney was out. But what about my son? Was it inside of him yet? And was it going to work? The nurse's update about Ben only made the waiting worse. 2 more hours crawled by. It felt like 2 years. I paced the floor of the waiting room until I thought I was going to wear a hole in the cheap carpet. My wife, Sarah, just sat in her chair, staring at nothing. Finally, a different person came through the doors. He was a man in blue scrubs, and he looked exhausted. He pulled his surgical mask down, and I saw that it was Dr. Anderson, the surgeon who had worked on my son, Leo. He looked right at me, and his tired face broke into a small, gentle smile. That's when I knew. "The kidney is in," he said, his voice soft. "The new kidney started working right away. The initial signs are excellent. Leo is responding beautifully." The relief was so huge, so powerful, it felt like it knocked the wind out of me. My legs gave out, and I had to grab onto a chair to keep from falling. My boy was safe. He was going to be okay. The nightmare was over. Tears streamed down my face, but for the first time in days, they weren't tears of anger or fear. They were tears of pure joy. The next day, the hospital felt like a different place. The fear was gone, replaced by a quiet, fragile hope. I spent the morning in Leo's room. His color was already better. He was sleeping, but it was a deep, healing sleep. I could have stayed there forever, just watching him breathe. But I knew there was something else I had to do, a chore I had been dreading. Down the hall, in another room, was Ben, the man who had given my son this second chance at life. I walked out of Leo's room and stood in the hallway, looking at the door to Ben's room. It was just a plain brown door, but it felt like the hardest door in the world to open. I had to go in there. I had to face him, not as the man who destroyed my marriage, but as the man who saved my son. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what to say, but I knew I had to. I took a deep breath and walked toward his room. I pushed the door to Ben's room open and stepped inside. He was lying in bed, looking pale and hooked up to an IV. The powerful surgeon was gone. In his place was just a tired, sick man in a hospital gown. He looked weak. For the first time in this whole mess, I felt like I was the stronger one. I walked to the foot of his bed and just stood there. He opened his eyes and looked at me. He seemed surprised to see me. We looked at each other in silence for a long moment. I knew I had to say it. The words felt like stones in my mouth, heavy and hard to get out, but I forced them. "Thank you," I said, my voice raspy, "for what you did. You saved his life." Ben just nodded slowly, wincing a little from the pain. I was about to turn and leave, to escape back to the safety of Leo's room, but then he spoke, his voice weak but clear, and his words made it clear that nothing was over. "He's my son too, Mark," he whispered. "I would have done anything for him." I walked out of Ben's room, his words He's my son too, ringing in my ears. The fragile peace I felt after Leo's successful surgery was gone. This was my new reality. This was my life now. My wife, Sarah, was waiting for me in the hallway. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Her eyes were full of fear. She must have seen me go into his room. "Mark," she started, her voice a fragile whisper, "I know I don't have any right to ask you for anything. I know I destroyed everything." She took a small, shaky step toward me. "But I'm asking you to forgive me. I love you, Mark. You are my husband, and you are the best man I have ever known." I just looked at her. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt tired. So incredibly tired. The fight was gone out of me. "I don't know, Sarah," I said, my voice heavy. "I don't know if I can. Right now, all I can think about is Leo." I walked away, leaving her standing alone in the hallway, our entire marriage hanging by a single thin thread. A week went by. Every day my son Leo got a little bit stronger. The color came back to his cheeks. He started telling jokes again. It was like watching a flower bloom in fast forward. It was beautiful, but it was a gift from a man I hated. One afternoon the nurses let him sit in a wheelchair for the first time. He was so excited. And the first thing he asked to do, the very first place he wanted to go, was to visit Dr. Ben. My heart sank, but I had to smile and say, "Okay." I pushed his wheelchair down the hall to Ben's room. Ben was sitting in a chair, looking much better. Leo beamed at him. "Thank you for my new kidney, Dr. Ben," he said in his clear, happy voice. "My dad said you were a hero." I saw Ben look at me over the top of Leo's head. His eyes were filled with 1,000 things I couldn't read. Guilt, thanks, sadness. I just gave a tight little nod. For now, for Leo's sake, we would all play our parts. Weeks turned into months. Leo came home from the hospital. He was healthy. He was running and playing and being a normal kid again. Life almost felt normal. But there was a shadow hanging over all of us, our promise to Ben. The day finally came when we couldn't put it off any longer. Ben came over to our house on a Saturday afternoon. The three of us, me, Sarah, and Ben, sat on the couch in our living room. It was the most unnatural, uncomfortable thing I've ever done. We called Leo in. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he would be able to see it beating through my shirt. I was the one who started. I told him how much I loved him. Then we gently, carefully told him the story. We told him that a dad is the person who tucks you in at night and helps you with your homework. We told him that would always, always be me. But we also told him that Ben had given him a special gift a long time ago, the gift of life. And now he had done it again. We laid the truth out in front of him, and the whole world seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what this little boy would do with it. We all stared at my son, Leo, waiting for the explosion. We were ready for tears, for yelling, for a million difficult questions. He just sat there on the floor with his toys, his face serious. He looked at me for a long time. Then he looked over at Ben, who was holding his breath. Finally, Leo looked back at me and asked the simplest question in the world. "So," he said, tilting his head, "I have two dads." I felt a lump form in my throat. I couldn't speak, so I just nodded. I saw Sarah, my wife, wipe a tear from her eye. Leo considered this new information for a moment, like he was figuring out the rules to a new game. All the grown-up pain, the lies, the betrayal, none of that mattered to him. He just saw the simple truth. "Okay," he said with a little shrug. "Cool." Then he picked up his baseball glove. "Can we go play catch now? You can both come." And just like that, with a kid's perfect, simple wisdom, the scariest moment of my life was over. The first big test of our new, weird life was Thanksgiving. As part of our deal, Ben came over for dinner. It was the most awkward meal I have ever eaten. My wife, Sarah, tried way too hard, bustling around the kitchen, talking too loud, trying to pretend we were all one big happy family. Ben and I made stiff, polite small talk about the Cleveland Browns. It was awful. I felt a constant low buzz of anger every time I looked at him sitting at my table in my house. But then something happened. Ben told Leo a stupid joke, something about a turkey. Leo let out a huge, genuine belly laugh. the same laugh I hadn't heard in months back when he was sick. And as I watched my son laugh, happy and healthy, a tiny little crack formed in the ice around my heart. For just a second, I didn't see the man who destroyed my life. I just saw another man who loved my son. It wasn't forgiveness, not even close, but it was something. That moment at the dinner table made me think about my own dad. He died when I was just 16, a heart attack that came out of nowhere. He was a quiet man, a mechanic who always had grease under his fingernails. He wasn't the kind of dad who said, "I love you" a lot, but I never doubted that he did. I remember one time, I asked him for advice about something, and he put down his wrench and looked right at me. "Mark," he said, "being a man isn't about blood or being the strongest guy in the room. It's about one thing. You show up. You show up when it's easy, and you show up when it's hard. You just keep showing up." As I sat there at that miserable Thanksgiving dinner, I realized that's what I had done. When my whole world fell apart, when I learned my son wasn't my son, I didn't run. I showed up. I had lived by my father's simple code. And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, I felt a little bit proud of myself. A few months later, I was standing on the sidelines of my son Leo's soccer game. It was a cold Saturday in Cleveland, and the sky was grey. Ben was there too. He always was now. He stood about 10 feet away from me. We had a silent agreement to give each other space. We both just watched our son run around chasing the ball. For a long time, neither of us said anything. We just watched. Then Ben spoke, his voice quiet, not even looking at me. "You know," he said, watching Leo trip, fall, and then get right back up laughing. "He has your sense of humor. He's clumsy like you. He's more like you than he is like me." I watched Leo make a goofy face at one of his teammates, the same exact face I make when I'm joking around. Ben was right. The boy was mine in all the ways that truly mattered. I finally answered him, my voice just as quiet. "I know." And in that moment, something shifted between us. It wasn't forgiveness. It was just a quiet understanding between two fathers. That night, I went home feeling a little lighter than I had in a long time. I found my wife, Sarah, sitting on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket. For months, we had been living like polite roommates. We talked about Leo, about bills, about groceries. We never talked about us. I sat down in the chair next to her. I knew it was time. "I don't know if I can ever forget what happened, Sarah," I started, my voice honest. "I don't think I can. A part of me will probably always be angry." She just nodded, looking down at her hands. "But," I continued, "I'm tired of the silence. I'm tired of feeling this way. Leo deserves a happy home. He deserves to see his parents smile at each other." I looked at her, the woman I had loved for so long, the mother of my son, and I made a choice. I reached out and took her hand. It was cold, but she squeezed mine back. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a beginning, a promise to try. A year passed. Life settled into a new, strange rhythm. It was our new normal. Ben was a part of our lives now. He came over for dinner most Sundays. He took Leo to Indians games. To Leo's friends, he was just Uncle Ben, a cool doctor who was friends with the family. Only we knew the complicated truth. It was still weird sometimes. I'd see him laughing with my son and feel a flash of the old anger, but it was duller now, ached instead of stabbed. My wife Sarah and I were healing too. We were talking again, rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. It was slow, careful work. Our marriage wasn't the same as it was before. It was like a favorite mug that had been broken and glued back together. You could still see the cracks if you looked closely, but it was strong again. It could still hold something warm. We were a messy, complicated, weird little family, but we were a family and we were making it work. One afternoon, my son Leo was working on a school project at the kitchen table. It was a family tree. I watched him as he carefully drew a little box with his name in it. Then he drew 2 lines coming down to his box. At the top of one line he wrote, "Dad, Mark." At the top of the other he wrote, "Dad, Ben." He sat there looking at it for a long time, chewing on the end of his pencil. Finally, he looked up at me, his expression serious and a little worried. "Dad?" he asked. "It's okay, right? That I love you both?" His innocent question hit me right in the heart. All our grown-up fears, all our worries about confusing him or hurting him, and all he wanted to know was if it was okay to love. I knelt down beside him and pulled him into a huge hug, burying my face in his hair. "It's more than okay, buddy," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "It's perfect." And I realized in that moment that he was going to be just fine. We threw a big party for Leo's 11th birthday in our backyard. It was a perfect summer day in Ohio. All his friends were there, running around, screaming and laughing. I was at the grill, flipping burgers, when Ben came over to grab one. For a minute, we just stood there in comfortable silence, watching the chaos. The old sharp anger between us was gone. It had been replaced by something quiet, a kind of truce. "You know," I said, not looking at him, "I never thanked you properly. Not just for the kidney, but for keeping your promise, for respecting the rules, for letting me be his father." Ben was quiet for a moment, watching Leo try to teach his friends a new baseball pitch. He finally turned to me and said something I will never forget. "He already had a father, Mark," he said, his voice quiet. "He just needed a surgeon." It was the closest he would ever get to saying he was sorry. And it was enough. When we asked Leo what he wanted for his big birthday present, he didn't ask for a new bike or the latest video game. He asked for something different. "I want you, Mom, and Dad Ben to take me to an Indians game," he said. "Just us." So the next weekend, the four of us went. We sat in the stands, the sun on our faces, the smell of popcorn in the air. It should have been weird. It should have been uncomfortable. But it wasn't. It just felt right. Leo sat between me and Ben, his head turning back and forth, talking to both of us about the game. He was so happy. And watching him, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. This was my family. It was messy and complicated and born out of a terrible pain, but it was my family. As the crowd cheered for a home run, Leo, without even thinking, reached out and grabbed my hand with one of his, and Ben's hand with the other, and for a moment we were all connected. Sitting there at the ballpark in Cleveland, watching my son Leo laugh, a simple truth finally hit me, and it was so clear. All this time I had been so hung up on blood, on biology, on what the doctors and the DNA tests said, but I had it all wrong. Biology didn't make me Leo's father. I wasn't his dad because of some accident in a lab 10 years ago. I was his dad because I chose to be. I chose it every morning when I made his breakfast. I chose it every night when I read him a bedtime story. I chose it when I held his hand in the hospital. And most of all, I chose it on the worst day of my life, the day I found out the truth, and I decided to fight for him anyway. Fatherhood isn't a title. It's not something you are. It's something you do. It's a choice you make, over and over and over again. And I had made my choice. No test in the world could ever take that away from me. After the game, we walked out of the stadium with the happy, buzzing crowd. Leo was swinging between me and Ben, holding both our hands, making us walk in a funny way. He was just a happy, healthy kid, without a care in the world. He had no idea that he was the living, breathing result of so much pain and so many secrets. He was the cure to the disease he was born from. In that moment, walking under the big stadium lights, I looked over at Ben, and for the first time, I didn't feel a single trace of the old anger. I didn't see the man who stole my past. I didn't see my rival. I just saw the other man on planet Earth who loved my son with his whole heart. I gave him a small, almost unnoticeable nod. He caught my eye and nodded back. No words were needed. We would never be best friends again. But we were partners. We were allies. We were two dads, united by the one thing that mattered most. That night, after Leo was asleep, I was in the living room looking at an old photo album. There was a picture of me holding Leo in the hospital the day he was born. He was so tiny. I felt a pair of arms wrap around me from behind. It was my wife, Sarah. She rested her chin on my shoulder, looking at the picture with me. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I thought she was thanking me for the good day we'd had, but it was more than that. "Thank you for not leaving all that time ago," she said. "Thank you for choosing us, for choosing our family, even after I broke it." I closed the photo album and turned around to face her. I looked into her eyes, and I saw all the years of guilt she had carried. But I also saw the love that had always been there. I put my hands on her face. "We're his parents," I said softly. It was the only choice. And for the first time, I knew our marriage wasn't just glued back together. It was something new, something stronger. That night I went into my son Leo's room just to watch him sleep. The moonlight streamed through his window, falling across his peaceful face. I sat on the edge of his bed, just like I had all those nights in the hospital. But this time, there was no fear. There was no anger. There was just peace. I had been through a fire that should have burned me to ashes. I had lost my identity, my best friend, and the marriage I thought I had. I had faced the very real possibility of losing my son. But I had walked through it all, and I had come out the other side. I wasn't the same happy-go-lucky man I was before. The fire had left scars, but I was stronger. I was a father. Not because of a DNA test, but because of the choices I had made. I leaned down and kissed Leo's forehead. My heart, which had been broken into a million pieces, finally felt whole again. The war was over, and we had won. About a week later, I was sitting at the kitchen table going through a pile of mail. The usual stuff: bills, credit card offers, pizza coupons. Life was finally beautifully boring again. I was about to toss a fancy-looking envelope into the recycling bin, thinking it was just more junk mail. But something made me stop. It was from a genealogical research company. That was strange. I'd never used one of those. The letter was addressed to me, but the subject line read, "Regarding the estate of the late Daniel Collins." Daniel Collins was my father. My heart skipped a beat. That didn't make any sense. My dad had been an orphan, raised in the system. He was an only child, and he had no family to speak of. He certainly didn't have an estate. He left me his old toolbox and a watch that didn't work. What in the world could this be about? With a feeling of confusion and a little bit of dread, I picked up a knife and slit the envelope open. The letter was short and to the point. It said that as part of settling a distant relative's affairs, a company-wide DNA search had been done, and that search had found a match. It said that my father, Daniel Collins, the man who had been my hero, the man who taught me about honesty and showing up, had a secret. According to their records, he had a paternal sibling, a brother or a sister, that he apparently never knew existed. I just stared at the piece of paper, my mind reeling. It seemed my family tree had more hidden branches than I ever could have imagined. This whole time I had been dealing with my wife's secret, but it turns out my own father had one too. So now I have to ask you, the person who has listened to my whole story, after everything you've heard, after all the pain and the lies, I need you to tell me who you think was the bigger betrayer, my wife Sarah, who broke her vow, or my best friend Ben, who broke my trust. Let me know in the comments. Just write Sarah or Ben and tell me why you chose them. And finally, if you believe that family is truly defined by the choices we make, not just the blood in our veins, then prove it. Like this story and subscribe to this channel, because it seems we have a whole new mystery to solve together.